In this video, I would like to introduce you to game design, or the game design process. Um, by game, I'm referring to tabletop games such as board games and card games, uh, rather than computer or video games because they have a different process. Um, but so what is the game design process? Well, it's just the process um, that anybody can use to design a game. Um, it has applications. It can be used by an educator, a teacher, to design an educational game for their students to help them understand a difficult concept. Um, Games are a great educational tool. It's also good. Games are very nice hobby for many people. Designing them is also a nice hobby. I think it's important for people to still be designing some tabletop games in the electronics age. So I'll give you an overview of this process. Then I'll go into some detail about the steps. So first we have an idea. Then there is the development stage. Then the gameplay is formed. A prototype is made. It's play tested. And after a few cycles, it's finalized. So I'll make sense of each of these for you. So the idea. The idea is just the idea for the game. It should be original, and it should be from your own thoughts and imagination. Nobody can really put an idea into your head, so it's all from the designer. Um, there's typically two ways that a designer would come up with an idea for a game and base the rest of the game around it. They could be both of these, but it's usually one. There's a mechanic-driven idea, and then there's a theme-driven idea. So a mechanic is just basically an element of gameplay. It's like a gear in a watch. It's just sort of a part of the game that makes it work and create a certain element of gameplay. So for example, in the popular game Monopoly, one mechanic is the trading mechanic, the buying and selling of properties. That's sort of a mechanic, trading money for the title deed. And then you can have, well, of course you have multiple mechanics in a game, but oftentimes a designer will just use one as the basis for the game. Another inspiration for the whole game is a theme. So in the case of Monopoly, the theme could be that the players are business capitalists that are striving to bankrupt each other and become the wealthiest player around the board. So a theme is also one way that an idea may be inspired. So once you have the idea, you develop it. Developing is you just come up with your specifications. How many players do you want to be able to play this game? How long do you want it to take? What do you want it to be, a board game, a card game? What kinds of pieces would you want to include? If there are any certain goals, like if it needs to teach a certain concept to students, anything like that. Also, considering the target audience, who is this game for? Ages, groups, interests. So you just make this idea more specific. Then once you have all these, you move on to gameplay. This is, I would say, at least the hardest part. You write a basic version of your rules. They don't have to be perfect just to get your ideas on paper. Just write down the rules in a simple form. And you think about what kinds of mechanics you want. Different mechanics that you invent or use, which ones you want to include, how you want to influence your players. This is also a good time to consider luck and strategy. Do you want to introduce dice? Which parts of the game do you want to randomize? Considering all the gameplay the experience for the players is important to consider. Um, so once you have a basic sort of like a skeleton for your gameplay, you can build a prototype. It's just a playable version of your game, if you will. It's just playable. It should be simple. Basically, it can be hand-drawn. Just the goal of the prototype is to make the correct number of cards, include all the pieces, maybe a typed-up version of the rules, so that people can play it. That's just the goal of the prototype. It doesn't need to look perfect, just as long as clear and legible. Then you move on to playtesting. So playtesting is also an important step. You want to get your target audience involved. Going back here, you want to get a few different groups of your target audience. Get them together maybe initially with family and friends. And you just want to give them your prototype as if you were to give them your game with the rules. Just let them figure it out, read the rules, and they should be able to understand the rules and play the game. Just let them play the game. You may want to see how long it takes. You may need to adjust the time, see how many players it can handle, try out different groups, different sizes, and just make sure that it is your target audience. That's important. And it's tempting to help the playtesters out, but don't. You could be in the game, but don't, because you need to make sure your rules are clear and easy for people to understand. Also get some feedback from your playtesters. That's important. Ask them how the game was, what things were good, what things weren't. And then after you playtest, this is kind of a cycle. You go back to your gameplay, your development. You may even need to kind of adjust your prototype, add stuff. It's sort of like editing a book, if you will, revising. So you go back, you might change your specifications, you might rewrite your rules, add mechanics, take mechanics away, revise existing ones. You might just even revamp the whole gameplay. You would just go back, revise, and then adjust your prototype if necessary. Playtest again. It's important to keep playtesting. Playtesting is a very important step because ultimately people need to understand it and have fun or learn from it if it's an educational game. So you need to go through this cycle multiple times until the game gets more refined and better, clear, more fun, more informative, depending on what kind of a game it is. Eventually, there will be a time that you will feel the game is ready to be finalized. That's kind of a hard decision because oftentimes you would think it's final, but it isn't. So it's important to keep playtesting and revising until it really is clear to all your playtesters, different people. The rules are clear. The game runs smoothly. It's fun if it's a hobby game, if it's a game designed for the mass market, or if it's an educational game. Is it actually educating the people who are supposed to learn from it? So once it has met all its goals, once it's running smoothly, then it's time to finalize. You might just do one more maybe revision and one more playtest if you want. You might start considering art, just kind of what the pieces will look like, what the game itself, the design sort of the game. Just thinking about its final form when you want to present it to your final target audience, whoever you were designing it for, whether it's the market or a certain group. So you just want to finalize it, and whether you'd want to publish it or whatever you want to do from there, then you go present it to your final audience. So just to recap these steps, I know this is kind of a long process, but you start with an idea. You develop the idea, make it more specific. you create your gameplay, including mechanics, writing some basic rules. You prototype, you create a playable, simple version of your game. You play test with your target audience, get feedback, go back to your other aspects and revise them. Go through this cycle several times until the game is running smoothly and it's clear to everyone and it accomplishes any goals it may have. And you finalize, you consider art, design, and anything else that's left. I hope that was informative and clear and helpful. Thank you for watching.